Hi, everybody. Today is January 20th, 2021, and you are at the Kubernetes K8s Infra Working Group bi-weekly meeting. I am your host, Aaron of Sig Beard. You also can find me as SpiffXP on all the places, Slack and GitHub and Gmail. And this meeting adheres to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which basically boils down to don't be a jerk. If you find a problem with the behavior of people in this meeting, you're welcome to reach out to me or conduct@kubernetes.io. This meeting is being publicly recorded and will be available on YouTube later. Okay, I think I said the spiel. I feel like I don't know if I remember having met some of the folks on here. Does anybody feel like introducing themselves? Or welcoming new members or attendees?
I think I know everyone here, right, at least by name. I maybe couldn't pick you out of a crowd, some of you who don't have video on.
That's all good. We won't video shame.
No shame.
Okay, so next up, each meeting we take a look at our building reports and just sort of make sure they line up. So I will share my screen and Tim can double check whether the numbers I'm looking at look correct. So this billing report is publicly accessible to anybody who's a member of the Kubernetes WG K8s Infra Google group. Anybody can join. This is what our spend looks like over the past 28 days. There's nothing wildly surprising about this to me. Once the new year started and people kind of came away from the holidays and started working on the project again, starting to see our weekly traffic show up again. So a lot of the traffic is people downloading our images on a weekly basis and also running CI jobs on our infrastructure on a daily basis.
And the numbers I see through the console view match up pretty closely, modulo probably a few hours of difference on the sync. And so we're within spitting distance.
All right, cool. I forget what the next page. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't feel particularly compelled to walk through the rest of this, but for people who are interested, we have other pages that break it all down by SKU and things like that. Does anybody have any questions about the building report? Okay, let's stop sharing that. Let's see, any AI review. I was bad last meeting and didn't actually take the time to write down action items as people were talking about things. But I know there was a lot of discussion around cert manager. And I think Ricardo was gonna look at helping out around this. Do we have any updates on that?
Yeah, so I've raised two issues. The first one is to update the cert manager to a newer version. I've reached James so he could help me with the PR. There is an extra large PR that James is taking a look. He told me that actually cert manager is updated by manually. What we have inside the repo is only like a copy of the manifest, but once you update that, it's not updating in the cluster. But I'm just waiting for James to review it, and I'm going to apply with him, like seeing how he does. And I have started to create a simple CLI that can connect to a Kubernetes cluster and fetch all of the CRDs and from certificates and issue some sort of warning based on days, like I want to issue a warning of 20 days or 10 days until expiration, so we can start trying to reach people if we see something expiring. And my next step into this is probably trying to write some sort of plugin so we can say if we want to post this on some Slack channel or send an email to some sort of mailing list and bring to you folks about how are we going to control that, because we can't know who owns the certificate unless we put some sort of label or something like that, so we can know who to trigger some action, because the certificate object, it doesn't have any other metadata. So probably I'm going to bring this discussion later, some week later, how to map who owns each certificate so we can warn people, see, and also like revoke the certificate or renew or ask what's being made with that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. That sounds like something we don't have to work on today, but that would be really helpful for us down the line. I found the issue you opened, update cert manager. I put a link to that in the meeting notes for people who want to find it. And I also just added it to the 121 V121 milestone. Hopefully make it easier to find. I'm going to try and groom K8s Infra issues a little bit better this release cycle. So I've added milestones to the repo that line up with the current Kubernetes release cycle. So while we're working on stuff during the 121 release cycle, issues that we think are important to do, then I'll put in that milestone. So if I've missed anything, Ricardo, please drop links to issues in chat or in the doc would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. I've put the PR into the docs also, so anyone that wants to review it. I still need to write some sort of README because we followed a different process and and we split the manifest into smaller files, so it would be easier for anyone that wants to review, because the cert manager manifest by itself is something like 2,000 lines or more because of the CRDs. So James provided me a tool that helps to split the cert manager manifests, and then we might have this organized into directories. But I will write the README also. But the PR is there.
Okay.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your help, Ricardo. Super cool. See you dive in. Okay. Let's see. The only other AI type thing I can get out of last meeting was that I said I would review a PR that Justin opened about creating and managing AWS accounts via Terraform. I did that. I don't have sufficient access to actually run the Terraform to verify that it does what he claims it does. But it mostly looks good. I don't know. TLDR, I left comments, and I think Justin and I and perhaps some of the cluster API folks need to iterate on it a little bit. I got the impression that some of the image builder subproject people, or maybe it was the cluster provider AWS people, were a little blocked on this. So if you're watching this recording, or you know those people, and that's the case, please encourage them to reach out on to the K8s Infra Slack channel, and we can work through how to unblock them while making sure that we are setting ourselves a good example on how to do this going forward. Okay. Arnaud, you like to talk about prow migration?
So basically, as we know, we need to migrate most of the resource owned by Google to the community owned infra. And I'm working on set up a pro staging instance in the AAA cluster. And my question today is basically what needs to be done to migrate Pro without break things, because I think I opened a specific issue related to hook up this staging instance to build cluster, and Aaron made a comment about it's not possible to do that because we can have two pro instance against the build cluster. So right now I'm looking for guidance to know what needs to be done.
Yeah. So, ideally, I am the chair of SIG testing, so I'd love to be the guy who helps you out on this. But given that my bandwidth is already stretched a little bit, I think it would be helpful for you to talk to some of the folks who are more directly involved with Prow on a day-to-day basis. Because these days, Prow is kind of like its own sub-project, independent of SIG testing and Kubernetes and stuff. So for specific names, I know that Cole Wagner and Alvaro Alaman are pretty active when it comes to Prow questions and reviewing Prow PRs. I also know that Chow Dai, his GitHub handle is Chow Dai G, I think, was working on trying to help, I think it was Knative, migrate their Prow build cluster stuff. I will write those names down. I can't talk and write at the same time. But basically, I don't think we've ever had Prow, had two Prow control planes simultaneously talk to the same build cluster before. So there might be some things that we need to change in Prow to support that as a concept. Or if the experts behind Prow say, actually, that's just such a fundamental assumption that we can't support that, we'll have to figure out how to do some kind of migration with minimal downtime. Similarly, I'm not sure if there is prior art for having multiple Prow instances servicing the same repo at the same time, or the same org at the same time. So I feel like it's going to be an exercise of trying to ask yourself the question of what would that process look like step by step, and then try to bounce that off of the Prow experts and say, hey, what would break in this? What do we need to change to support this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I know all of those names, so I can ask them.
Okay. This I think it's really awesome that you are working on this. I have an issue open that's about developing a Prow migration plan, and so maybe I can help you on this. I tried to author a big old Google Doc about everything that was going to have to happen to migrate Prow in its entirety, and setting up a staging instance of Prow will help us identify some of those things. So that's really helpful. But when I wrote that large Google Doc, I kind of left how we set up a staging Prow and how we actually do the migration as an exercise for future me or some future person, because it seems like there was enough there for just migrating the existing CI jobs to new build clusters. The only other thing that had come to mind is like, we won't be able to reuse the K8s CI robot account on a separate Prow instance. The reason being that that account gets 5,000 tokens per hour. And if we start to have two different Prow instances using GitHub API tokens for the same account, it's going to be really surprising and unpredictable as to when one of them is going to run out of tokens.
Okay.
But having a separate one actually is a good thing, right? Because K8s CI robot have a lot of permissions that my guess is that the staging prow doesn't need also.
It does not need those, that's true. But I think as we look towards migrating the jobs, I don't know. I personally don't want to go through the exercise of migrating to a bot that has a different set of permissions. As lazy as it is to like use a bot that has org owner privileges and just be very, very careful with it. There probably be a lot of assumptions that had to be untangled. But I agree. I'd like to keep things as separate and non-privileged as we can until we have to raise privileges. And I am totally fine with the idea of running the staging Prow instance as just another app in the AAA cluster. That sounds good to me.
Cool.
Okay, anybody have any other specific things they want to bring up? Okay. No, don't share my entire screen. Okay, I had one specific thing I was going to bring up, and then I will try walking through our board. This one's mostly since Tim is here. I noticed that the audit files have been really horribly out of date. I used to be running that script as a human when I was making changes regularly back in April or May of 2020. It hadn't been run in 7 months. So I reran it. This PR has 7 months worth of changes in it. I tried to break it down commit by commit. And then I tried to save all of the changes that are like raising questions for me or feel like they shouldn't quite be that way down at the bottom. And I prefixed their commit messages with QQ. If you want to subject yourself to the pain of reading all this, or you feel like somebody should, then we can go through that exercise. I can try to spend some time attempting to tie individual commits to like the issues or PRs that I think that may have caused these changes. But again, this is 7 months of history.
I think this is you're a hero for doing this. Did you assign it to me? Because I haven't seen it. I think as you scrolled past, I was marked as a reviewer, but not an assignee, which means I almost certainly missed it.
Okay, I will assign it to you.
If you assign it to me, it will pop up in my mailbox and I will go, oh my God, Aaron, what are you doing to me? And then I will find time to do it.
Okay. So immediately after doing this monstrosity, I was reminded I really, really don't want us to ever have to go through this again. So I really, really want someone to work on the task of setting up a job that will automatically run the audit script and automatically open a PR if one doesn't exist. If a PR does exist, I want it to just update the contents of that PR for human review. This is the same way that like Prow's auto bump functionality works. Every day there's something that runs that updates all the images to the latest thing and creates or updates a PR, and it's up to a human to review it. but at least that way, like, we are reminded that things are changing.
Yes, and to add to that, we specifically we think we've set things up in a way that the permissions on automating this should actually be pretty easy, right? You should just need to create a Google service account, which we then add to the Google group that we have for the auditing, and that should be it.
Yeah, I even got that far.
Oh,
So I've linked to this in the issue. This was on my personal Prow instance. I set up a Prow job that got as far as like running the script and getting ready to commit all the changes. But where I got stuck was actually creating the PR. And so I have links to how that's done for test infra's job that does auto bumping. And I just need somebody's help to actually push that over the line. But I did get as far as like creating a service account that just has audit privileges, and I can help make sure that service account is available on the appropriate Prow instance for you to run that job. Anyway, I've tagged it as help wanted. If you know somebody who wants to help out, this would be really greatly appreciated.
so I know that in the last part of last year, everybody was busy doing other stuff, and I know, at least I'll speak for myself. My attention shifted elsewhere for a while. This is important. We probably shouldn't do anything substantial until we get this pinned down. Like, we should not take on any new major migrations or projects until we understand this.
That may be fair. Yeah, I suppose that's true. If it's about doing it expediently, then I can probably find time to work on it. But I'm trying to be good about helping others work on this stuff.
I'm with you. I probably could bump something to do this, but this is supposed to be, the goal here was to make a self-standing community. So hopefully we can get more people. And Ricardo, I know you keep volunteering for stuff, so don't you dare volunteer for this one.
No, I was going to suggest that as we have like a small quorum here, probably sending this to the mailing list or Slack and asking people for help, because I think that we've got a small quorum here, but the mailing list is still big, right? And we have some folks that want to help, but they probably can't attend. So I don't know if this is going to be better. I can volunteerize myself to this team. I am really out of bandwidth.
Good.
I'm really happy to hear you say that.
Step one is admitting that you have a problem.
Yeah, no,
So,
you're totally right. I'm really bad about putting together a document and a plan without bouncing it off of other people for review. So that's sort of why it helps me to talk about this stuff at this meeting. But I do agree that as we figure out the critical path, I will inform the mailing list. Okay. So to that end, the place I want us to live, or here's my vision for this quarter. I really want us to work on issues that are in the same milestone as the rest of the Kubernetes project. So there are many people out there who are developing version 121 of Kubernetes. So I've got a version 121 milestone, and we can assign issues to this milestone to say, this is what we want to work on this quarter. Separately, I have the project board here, which tries to sort of set up some different workflow phases for our tasks. And I've tried to break up our backlog into two kinds of work that I see us handling. The first is kind of what I perceived as the original purpose or mission of this working group, which is to get everything migrated away from google.com owned GCP infrastructure. So I have an umbrella issue for this, which I can't find right now. But basically everything in the infra to migrate column should be describing either at a Google project level or individual piece of infrastructure, like, hey, this is something the project uses or depends on, and we should move it to community-owned stuff. So in the issue, I tried to break it down in terms of projects that appear to host miscellaneous infrastructure, projects that are referenced by Kubernetes CI, projects that host release or CI artifacts, and then projects that are used like manually for end-to-end testing. Like there are certain jobs that might require their own project that has some special permission thing set up or whatever. And so roughly my hope is that like all these manual things, we should I view this maybe as the last step of work where we'll identify who owns the jobs that depend on these things, and it is up to them to get their jobs migrated away, or decide they don't need those jobs or whatever. Migrating away from Google containers, we already did one half of this. We migrated k8s.gcr.io over to the community. It's great. We started spending a lot more money when we did that. That's super cool. The other thing that Google Containers hosts is all of our binary artifacts that live in two GCS buckets, Kubernetes release and Kubernetes release dev. Those handle a lot more traffic than the project's container images. And so if we wanted to migrate the most dollar spend, we would want to work on migrating the binary stuff first. But that said, it's less clear to me that migrating the most dollar spend will actually provide the most contributor benefit.
I think it's important that we move those because I think the visibility is important, and B, right now the control is out of the hands of SIG release except for Googlers, right? So I really think we need to fix that. This is you called it out, but like the under text here is it's really complicated because we've exposed that bucket name directly to the world. There's lots of stuff that downloads directly from that bucket name.
Yeah, so I had a couple ideas on intermediary steps to help us proceed there. Let me think. Okay, the first one is we sort of developed this container promotion process that I think is well understood by the community, and everybody, generally speaking, knows how to use it for container images. We don't actually have something that fully fleshed out for binary artifacts. I think Justin may have been working on extending the artifact promoter to work for both binary artifacts in arbitrary GCS buckets, as well as container images that live in specially named GCS buckets. So I feel like we should figure out what our binary promotion story is, or binary promotion process is. We have a couple projects that have like GCS buckets in the K8s artifacts prod project, but I don't think things are fully working for them. I have an open issue to work with somebody from the CSI sub-project to figure out why they're not quite able to push to one of their buckets, and they're confused about whether they need to promote or use staging or what have you. And the only other person I know who uses buckets would be Ben for Kind, but I don't think he uses artifact promotion either. So I think we need to figure out what our story is for that. And then separately, we need to identify all of the references where the Kubernetes release bucket is manually used and work on how we're going to migrate those. In addition to like when we think it's safe to point the dl.k8s.io redirector over to the new bucket.
So you touched on, I think, the important part. We have this dl.k8s.io redirector. From looking at the traffic, we can't tell how much went through it and how much went directly to the bucket directly. So maybe one of the early steps could be to set up a new bucket and mirror all the binaries there, and then retarget dl.k8s.io and see what happens to the traffic. Or maybe not a bucket, but set up a load balancer with a vanity name on it so that it actually hides the bucket name. We can actually make that dl.k8s.io, so it won't be a redirect. It'll actually be a just direct serving from the bucket. And then at least we'll have logs, and B, we'll be able to see how much traffic is left in the old place, and we can figure out if we need to fix the next stage.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
I like that idea. I will work to create an issue for that. Like I said, it's tough for me to type and take notes, or talk and take notes at the same time. I like that idea. I have used Google's storage transfer service to try syncing from one bucket to another. It worked pretty quickly. It'd be tricky for like alpha releases and stuff, because the most frequently you can schedule those jobs is the storage sync jobs is every hour. But I don't.
What if we bootstrapped it and just had Steven and release team just always push to both?
We could look into that too. Like, it's unclear to me whether their tooling supports pushing to both, or if it's easier to have their push to one bucket and then set up something that syncs to the other. I think that's less of a problem for the release bucket. Like, I think we could just ask them to sort of manually ensure it shows up in both places for this experiment. But so the other thing I was going to say is we have this exact same problem for the K8s release dev bucket, which has less traffic than the K8s release bucket, but it's important that it's updated more frequently. Like, it's used a lot more by our CI. So I was planning on maybe authoring a cap on what it takes to stop using that bucket, or I need like a really big umbrella issue that describes all the places that we need to stop referencing that bucket directly. I've started writing that down in an issue in K8s.io. We also discovered that like KubeADM and a few other sub-projects need to change some of their hard-coded defaults in their APIs. And so currently working with them to decide whether they just want to make a breaking change in their alpha API, or if they want to make a new API version for those defaults. But either way, with both of these, I still feel like we're going to live in a world where we will want to keep those buckets around for a while during a deprecation window as we work to migrate everything over to the new buckets. We do have new buckets. They're K8s release and K8s release dev instead of Kubernetes release and Kubernetes release dev. Those live in the K8s release project in K8s Infra. I had hopes to talk to release engineering a lot more about their plans and their ability to staff this effort, but life has gotten in the way. So we can hopefully have more to talk about next meeting.
And for the record, it is possible to move a bucket. The way you do it is you completely empty the bucket, delete it, and then recreate it in the new target, and then repopulate it. Blah. But if we're willing to take a flag day where we say, like, if we can flip through the vanity domain and say, look, 90% of traffic is going to the new bucket anyway, we could salvage the old bucket name and move it out of the org and bring it back. But if we've already solved 90% of the traffic and we're willing to take a flag day like that, I'm not sure that it's worth bringing back. This is just my thought process. I'm thinking out loud here, right? I don't know how long that tail is going to be, and I don't know what, if anything, we can really do about that tail. It seems like the dev side, at least, we probably control most of the clients. I'm guessing, I'm hoping.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, how much we don't control.
So the best we can do is move all the things we do control away, and then see what's left.
Yeah. Okay. That's an option worth keeping in mind. I guess my quick question was, do you know if there's like some period of time, like how long do we have to wait before we are able to recreate the bucket with the same name in a different project?
I did some just very quick testing. I don't know that it's actually documented as like a procedure by Google, but I did some quick testing where I created a bucket, filled it with some stuff, deleted it, created a new project. It was nearly instantaneous.
All right. That's good to know. So kind of related, something else that could help us is if we were to turn on access logs for specific buckets. And we had started to do that for the K8s.gcr.io traffic. And we needed to stop for reasons I can't quite remember. Do we think we're at a point where we could turn that on again?
We could try. Justin and I started, we got an initial data dump and we're trying to figure out how to actually consume it. Realized that neither of us had time to follow through with it. And it was just going to eat money while we logged stuff that nobody was looking at. So we turned it off. We can go back and revisit it. In fact, I think I have some tabs open to revisit that for the last 6 months. So totally we can come back and revisit it. GCS is the same. Like again, if we were to tail off and move what we think is the bulk of traffic, like dl.k8s, then we could look at the logs and see what's left. I'm still not sure what that would show us. Maybe it would give us a pattern, maybe it wouldn't. We won't really know until we try it.
Okay. All right, so I hear you that this is still like one big chunk of the project that is not yet under the community's control. It's also the biggest dollar spend, so I agree that it's really important from that perspective. But I also personally feel like it is really important that all of the stuff that's kind of in the critical path of the project CI is under project control. So because I feel like migrating the artifact stuff is a pretty heavy lift, there are a lot of other projects that host like images for CI or infrastructure for CI that I think people who are scared by this sounding like a big task could more easily take on. Let's see here. I'm not quite sure how to walk through this. I'm sorry. So I'll walk through a couple that I know of for sure. But basically, I'm suggesting that everything that falls under the projects referenced by Kubernetes CI, I would like to try to set the goal that we get all of this migrated during this release cycle. I feel like the release engineering team was interested in working on this, but we'll have to see how much bandwidth they actually have. So there's an umbrella issue that I will populate with links to all of these projects. But my hope is we could close out everything in this umbrella issue. Walking through what they are briefly, there's some projects that are used by just very specific E2E tests in Kubernetes. So I feel like the work involved would be like, figure out why that test is there. Does it still need to be there? can it be rewritten in a way that uses a different project? And then, rewrite the test, set up the different project, and hooray, it all works. And there's probably a common decision we'll need to make for these things is whether it is appropriate to cherry pick changes to tests or images used in tests back to all previous supported versions of Kubernetes, or whether we would like to say, nope, we're not changing the tests in older versions of Kubernetes. We just need to let those changes age out.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Like, my preference would be to cherry pick the test things back, but I can see, especially for image names, how that might be perceived as some kind of breaking change for people who want to like air gap all of the images used in tests. For like, if suddenly the names of all the images that need to be air gapped change, they'll have to like reconfigure their testing environment. On the other hand, you could argue that like the tests have never had the same sort of API contract as the rest of Kubernetes. So,
and nothing, honestly, nothing ever said that we won't fix a bug on an old branch that requires a new build of a test binary.
right.
Like, that's fair game. It's just rare.
Yeah. So I think it's mostly fair game, but I feel like I'd like to have a conversation with a few more stakeholders. So authenticated test images is one. K8s authenticated test is another. This was part of what prompted the push to do all these CI projects, is something Google internal accidentally deleted this project. And so we had to scramble to undelete it and make sure it was configured appropriately. And we realized this test should be using something that community controls that won't get suddenly deleted. So these would be two great things for people who have Kubernetes experience to work on. And they're pretty like targeted to just like one or two specific tests. Slightly broader things. Many of the images used in Kubernetes CI come from some place called Kubernetes E2E test images. So instead, we should have them use k8s.gcr.io and use the proper repository. So for a couple of these issues, I've got companion issues in Kubernetes that try to spell out like all the work that needs to be done in the Kubernetes project to make this happen. So we've got like all the images that the test binary uses, their jobs that are set up to promote these. We just need somebody to actually go through the process of promoting all the images, bumping the versions, running the tests. Yeah.
We should actually be finishing this pretty soon.
Yes, and Claudio and Antonio have done a lot of work on this. So I feel like we will be most of the way there on this one.
Yeah, it's only a handful of images that still have to be retried and have them in staging and then promoted. Already sent a pull request which promotes quite a lot of them already. But after that, it should almost be closed.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if this Kubernetes node E2E images subproject was in use at all. So this is mostly going to be reaching out to Signode to figure out, because like it's referenced as a default project to use for some kind of image building or image pushing thing, but I don't know here. It's in the test E2E node code that's run when you like make test E2E node. It's referenced, but I can't tell what it's.
I actually didn't know about that one. Never heard about it before.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of like the test infra version of Kubernetes E2E images. So all the jobs that run our tests use images that live in the K8s test images repo. So any job that runs kubekins pulls from this google.com repo. So it's going to be a matter of like changing all the test infra image building jobs to push to a new project that is community owned, and then updating all the jobs to pull those images from the new project. So I feel like this is pretty wide reaching when it comes to the CI, but it also should be pretty straightforward, like search, replace, pretty mechanical, should be pretty doable. Some of these I would like to get them to the point where they are help wanted and doable by new contributors. GKE release. So this one weirded me out a little bit. The fact that GKE shows up in the Kubernetes project. Just personally, I would want to get rid of this as quickly as possible. Apparently, there are a number of images that are used either in testing E2E test manifests, or apparently this Windows-specific pause image that live in the GKE release project. I don't know who put them there or how they got there, but they shouldn't be there. So again, I think this is mostly going to be a matter of like who owns these tests or who owns these images. Steer them to using the same staging project, GCR image promotion process that the rest of the project has been using.
Yeah, we already added Windows support to the official pause image, so we can just replace that with the regular pause image that Kubernetes recommends.
Okay.
And it has been promoted as well. It's, I think, 3.4.
Okay, yeah. But it's not just pause, right? So there's like some GCP compute persistent, I don't know, looks like some CSI artifacts. So we maybe just have some storage people to talk to. And then run that one by SIG Windows to make sure they're where they should be catching that sort of thing. And then I'm guessing that GPU device plugin that's part of the device plugins add-on is probably SIG node.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, if we get through all of those, that's going to be a lot. Like a lot of the project CI will be entirely community owned. Yeah, there are a couple others that I would like to get help on, but I'm not sure they're quite as easily. They might be slightly more difficult or slightly more involved. So I guess, Arnaud, I have you in mind when I think of like work to try and get the Prow staging instance up and starting to understand how Prow is wired together with different bits of GCS infrastructure. I'd like people with kind of your level of knowledge to work on things like this, where there's some part of Prow that depends on like buckets or service accounts that are used by this project, and we should stop that. I've kind of been talking nonstop for about 25 minutes. I'm going to stop doing that. Is there any specific things that people want to bring up?
There's a lot of stuff on here that I really want to work on and to do. If I'm being very honest, my time right now is stretched pretty tight. And I'm just trying to be realistic with my commitment.
That's
so many things in here I want to do. I'm looking at them and be like, yeah, that's like a couple days of work.
Yeah. No, I'm moving that over. So that was me rambling about a lot about the projects that we have yet to migrate over. There's also a lot of stuff we're trying to do for the stuff we've already migrated over, and we're realizing like we need to do better, or we want to do better. So the audit job is one of them. Improving Cert Manager is another. There's that. People have attempted to promote mutable image tags, and they shouldn't be allowed to do that. So we need a pre-submit that stops them from trying that.
I thought the promoter would block that.
It's so like the promoter will block that, but it doesn't block it in pre-submit, which allowed somebody to merge something that didn't break the pre-submit jobs, but it broke everything going forward.
And I didn't see the issues where that happened. Were they legitimate like uses for trying to use mutable tags, or were they simply like made a mistake?
Somebody wanted to bump the latest tag to the latest image.
And we've disavowed them of that idea?
All tag mutations are not allowed.
But okay, I mean, I agree. I'm more questioning, like, did we convince them that this is their sane policy, or are we going to have to deal with this over and over again?
That's a good question that I have not had time to follow up with. I guess I would like to make that question the interest of the release engineering subproject. It was more like a SIG release thing. Not that I'm not like, I'm also interested in it, but I'm trying to, where appropriate, if I can find the SIG who wants that. So I will try and drag this near this. I upgraded the Prow build clusters to version 116 of Kubernetes. We talked before about eventually moving to release channels, so the clusters will update to versions automatically. We should do the same thing for the AAA cluster. I forget if the AAA cluster is still using API groups for some of its manifests that go away in 116. So I will see if I can find the PR. Here, let's click through. Because I know I'm pretty sure Arnaud worked on the PR that addressed this, but
yes, I remember reading it.
Okay.
Basically, we don't have to really care about this for AAA because the ingresses will be deprecated in 120, if I remember correctly. So we have time to take care of the ingresses. The most urgent thing was about the deployment.
Okay. Yeah, okay. This was about like changing the RBAC rules to make sure they support the proper API groups, but I didn't want us to remove RBAC rules for the old things because they weren't yet deleted.
Right.
Anyway, I'll work with you to wrap this. I was trying to raise it as I think we should get all of our clusters, not just the Prow cluster, onto release channels.
I have a pull request for the release channel.
Okay. Then I will assign myself to that pull request. Which I am already assigned. Okay, cool. I will take a look at this. Thank you for this. I think I was freaked out on whether or not Terraform would do an in-place change for switching to release channels or not.
Last time I tried, what's happening is basically Terraform will subscribe the cluster to the release channel without doing the upgrades. And when you specify the release channel, the cluster will be upgraded in the next maintenance window.
Okay. That sounds cool. We are at the end of our scheduled time. I will stop sharing my screen. So Ricardo, I will try to work to write up some of that, get some of that stuff that help wanted, and send out an email to the K8s Infra mailing list and see if people feel like I've sort of got the right set of work set aside for us to work on for this release of Kubernetes. I don't think most of those imagery names and stuff merit a cap. It could be that the larger binary artifact stuff does. I don't know. We'll find out. But I'll try to do better this quarter about keeping this subprod or this working group organized. But I'm super open for suggestions or help on how I could do better on this.
Aaron, I take umbrance with the do better language. I think you've done fine, and this is not about doing better. This is not your failing in any way. I just need to be on the recorded record with this, right? Like, this is a community effort, and it falls largely on the shoulders of about 6 people who show up and do work regularly. And I appreciate deeply those 6 people, but we need to continue to expand it. So if anything, the failing is on us expanding the body set, not on not making enough time to do the work.
Thank you for saying that the way that you did. I agree with what you are saying. I would like to find ways to make this work more approachable, because I do feel like needing certain security privileges to like create things aside, a lot of this is pretty doable, and it's really, really valuable and like really appreciated. So I just like to figure out how to encourage the group to grow a little more. But I will try to stop using a do better language. I like Tim, there's a lot of stuff here that I want to work on, but I know I don't have the bandwidth. I want to find a way for other people to work on it. Anyway.
Thank you, Aaron, and everybody.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks all. See you again in 2 weeks.
See you. Have a
Happy
nice week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.